Hey guys, what's going on? It's Matt Winning at winningstrength.com, and this is another edition of Winning Wednesday. This is an especially special Winning Wednesday because I had just finished at about 2 o'clock Eastern my dissertation. So we were going over all the pieces of my dissertation, walking through the different chapters of the book that's going to come out in Human Kinetics hopefully fairly soon, and we went over everything with the 4 other professors, and we passed. So now it's Dr. Matt Winning, I guess, if you guys want to call me that. But I joined an elite few people that have achieved either a PhD or a professional doctorate and also achieved all-time world records in lifting or any other endeavor. This makes this day, for me especially, insanely important and special based on the fact that this has been almost 50 years in the making. So, some things I want to go over, kind of motivation. For a lot of you guys may not know that in high school, my freshman year, I go into my freshman year in high school, and my father had passed away at the end of 8th grade, almost the start of my freshman year in August. So September starts school. I'm a little shooken by it, but I don't know how to deal with it. My grades my freshman and sophomore year were just atrocious based on the fact that I was probably going through some sort of a childhood PTSD and didn't really know how to deal with it. Fortunately, right about that same time, I'm riding my bicycle to the YMCA, and I'm making some really good mentor-style friends with a guy named Tim Smith and another guy named Jim Dawson. Tim Smith and Jim Dawson were both elite-level lifters at their time. Timmy Smith benching 500 at 181 body weight, and Jim Dawson being one of the first men to pull over 700 pounds in the Midwest in the early 70s. Both of these guys were different generations. Let's see, Dawson would have been in his mid-late 50s, and Timmy was in his early 30s when I met him. So now Dawson's in his 80s and Timmy's in his mid-late 50s. They start to mentor me under the lifting, and making me have a structured protocol after school, which I heavily needed, because if a lot of you don't know, Muncie, where I grew up, is a medium-sized town of about 100,000, but it's mostly poor neighborhoods and bad situations all around. Massive drug addiction, horrible job, I'm just throwing a brain fart now, but just there's not really a lot of advancements you can have in Muncie unless you work for the college or you work for the hospital. And so weight training became a massive passion of mine even as a young kid. And working through those different years, I started to realize that I wanted to do something with weightlifting, strength conditioning, but I didn't know how to do it. And, in my area that I grew up in, most of it was, blue collar type jobs. So long story short, welding was always a passion of mine as well. Something I was introduced to as a kid. I really liked it. And I thought that was going to be what I made money at because I knew guys that were welders that made good money. So I make my way through my sophomore year, and I start realizing in my junior year, I better get my grades up, or there's no way I'm going to get into college, because I'm talking like I had a very low C average as a sophomore. My junior year, I get a B average, and my senior year, I get above a B average, high B average, and but it wasn't enough to pull me out of the damage that I had done my freshman and sophomore year. So my first year out of high school, I take a year off from college. I don't go to college. I wouldn't have been accepted if I did. And I start the welding journey because I'm like, I can still lift when I get done welding and stuff like that. So I start welding with this hard-hitting dude named Ted Stevens. And Ted Stevens worked on the Alaskan pipelines when he was younger, and now he was in his early 60s. So we're welding chill water lines and steam lines and doing all this shit. And I remember one day he just looks at me and goes, "What the fuck do you want to do this for? Like, don't you want to do something with this lifting stuff?" And I'm like, yeah, I just don't know what to do, So I'm visiting my mom up in surgery because she was working up in the surgical area, and just so happened one of the other ladies that worked there, her son was an accountant for the Colts. So he asked me, hey, would you like to do a job shadow with the Indianapolis Colts? I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. So it's about 50 minutes away. I drive down to the Colts facility, and John Torine's working there. And John Torine's like, hey, what can I do for you? And I'm like, well, I want your job. He laughs, because I'm a stupid-ass 19-year-old kid. And he's like, well, if you want my job, you're going to have a high level of schooling. And he goes, where do you live? And I said, well, I live up in Muncie. He's like, oh, yeah, Ball State University. I'm like, yeah, Ball State University. Who cares? Like, without any knowledge of what Ball State University was doing at the time. And he goes, you realize that is the top school in the country for exercise science right now? And I'm like, no way. He goes, yeah, Dr. Kramer's there. Dr. Costel's there, Dr. Newton's there, all of these top level guys were all there. And so I'm like, oh, now I got a battle plan. He goes, go there and then enroll yourself in school. And then what I want you to do is I want you to find who the head strength coach is, and I want you to go and volunteer hours with him. Okay, I got a battle plan. So I apply to school. And about 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from Ball State, and I open it, and it says, we regret to inform you that you're not accepted into Ball State University due to your high school grades. And I'm thinking, son of a bitch, right? Like, how am I going to get into college if I can't even get into school? So I take it back to Ted, at the hospital on a work day, and I'm like, look at this, man. I can't even get in because of my high school grades. He goes, that doesn't mean anything. He goes, go into administration, show them, or admissions, and show them how much money you have in your checking account from working with me the last 6-7 months, and tell them you got enough to pay for 4 years of school, your own money that you've been working for. My stupid ass at that age thinking that's not going to mean anything. And he basically forces me on a lunch break. And so the admissions was about a quarter of a mile walk from where I was working. So I walk into admissions, and I asked to speak to the head guy, and I'm sitting there for a little while, and the secretary finally comes and gets me and goes sit in his office, and the dude looks familiar. And he's like, yeah, can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, I want to get into school. And I got a letter of rejection due to my grades, and I was wondering if you guys had any programs where you could get me in. And he goes, well, let's take a look. So he pulls up my file, and he's like, yeah, I see your grades, especially your first couple of years, were bad. And I explained to him about my dad, and I explained to him my situation. And I also explained to him that I had about $20,000 in my checking account that was my own money. Keeping in mind, going to Ball State in 1999 was $1,700 a semester. So I already had enough money for all my undergraduate degree. So I show him all this, and he goes, look, I can't make any promises, but I can try to get you in on probation. This was after we found out that we worked out at the YMCA together, just not doing the same thing. So he's like, yeah, you're that kid that just won Worlds and was on the news about a month ago. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he goes, well, I'm going to try to pull some strings to see if I can get you in on academic probation. So long story short, I go to academic probation. And I'm just sitting waiting for about 2 weeks. About a month before school starts, I get a letter that I'm accepted on probation, and I must get over a 3.0 GPA the first semester, or I'm permanently kicked out. So this is like a do or die situation for me. And I walk in, and I'm very underskilled in English, very underskilled in math, other than doing like vector type stuff, or like, welding things. But like general, just algebra and stuff, not real good at. And just had a very low level education. A lot of it was from just where I went to school. It just sucked. And so I get in, and I know it's this make or break time, and it's my own money I'm throwing away if I don't do well. So fast forward to the first semester through, it was a total pain in the ass, but I ended up getting like a 3.6 GPA the first semester, and I was in. All the while, on the extra time I had in between classes, I was helping out Wade Russell, which is now an online coach for me on the website. Wade's my boss, and I'm helping him with teams when I can. And then as the years progress, I do more hours in the weight room and less hours at the welding. And then by the time I go to grad school, I'm not really welding anymore. I'm just a GA. So those are the progressions to that. This is the phase 1 of this story. We'll go into phase 2 at next Wednesday for Winning Wednesday. I really appreciate you guys listening to the story and tuning in, but just remember that if you want to apply yourself hard enough, there's always a way to do something. You just have to figure it out. and not throw your hands up and just say screw it and move on. Sometimes you have to stick with it. So talk to you guys soon.